And of course, we're on day 7 of Amos, the prophet Amos, and we spent a lot of time on this one for one good reason, because all these judgments that came upon those nations. So now we're going to be dealing with the Ammonites, and this one is particularly interesting for several reasons, because up till now, we've been dealing basically with pagan nations. But this one the Ammonites are descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew. Incestuous relationship that came about the Ammonites and the Moabites. And these people, over now 500 years later, they had been so intermarried with all these pagan nations and so on, they'd become just like them. However, when Moses was coming out of Egypt, Mitzrayim, God instructed them not to touch the Ammonites or the Moabites, because they were relatives of Abraham. So they had no reason to fear Israel, but they did. And that's when the reason they hired Balaam, a prophet, to curse Israel. Both the Ammonites did, and so did the Moabites, and so did the Midianites, I believe is the other one that did that. And you know the rest of the story. God did not let. So we know that God didn't allow them to be cursed. They're relatives of Abraham. And so now we know that there's this huge enmity between the descendants of Lot against Israel, not with the same hatred that the Edomites had with the descendants of Esau, but still. And then another thing that the Ammonites were very, 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 they were well known for, was their worship of the deity Moloch. He's that deity where they sacrificed their children and put them through the fire. And when you look at Leviticus and Numbers, all different in the instructions that God gave Israel, you find that He had told them again and again the children of Israel have nothing to do with the worship of Moloch. Specifically tells them over and over again not to do that, and that's exactly what they were doing. And we know that we're going to see that that's what caused them a lot of trouble, why God was going to judge them, and that's what we're going to cover today. Okay, so there's a little bit of details scroll up so you can see the map a little bit, and still you can see that this kingdom of Ammon, you see it there in orange, and it's to the east of Israel, the kingdom of Israel. And if you look at the map on the left of that, you'll see that you had those 3 tribes of Israel that were dwelling there. That was basically Gilead, and that was the tribe of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh. They stayed on the east side of the Jordan, and they became a target of the Ammonites, because the Ammonites were trying to expand their kingdom towards the Jordan. And what they did is they would attack the Gibeonites or Gilead, that area there, and their practice was to rip the women open, the pregnant women, and that would cause the death of the mother as well as the child. And you wonder, well, why would they do something like that? Well, you have to realize something, that in the worship of Moloch, that to sacrifice and put your children to the fire was a way for them to gain prosperity. That was the teaching. And if the mother cried, then there would be no prosperity. So that's the reason why they would play the drums real loud. Hopefully, Eddie, you can hear that. They play the drums real loud so the mother would not hear the screams of the child, so she would not cry, and supposedly they would get the prosperity that they were looking for through this worship of this deity. And we know that Israel was forbidden from doing this, and that's exactly what you find later on of them being involved with. So anyway, so now that we know the location, we know what they're doing, now we're going to get a little history of the Ammonites, and that's when you have Deuteronomy 2:19. You can see, you scroll down a little bit. See this right here. You can see that right there. Okay, so here we got, it says, but when you come to the close to the Ammonites, do not harass or provoke them, because I am not giving you any of the Ammonites' land as your possession. I have already given it to Lot's descendants as their possession. That's what I mentioned earlier. They should have known that, but they didn't. They had 500 years they've forgotten. You know, we have short memories here. We forget stuff. Well, they had short memories too. And so, and then we go Deuteronomy 23:3-4. And here's an Ammonite or a Moabite may not enter the assembly of Jehovah to the 10th generation. My goodness, 10th generation.
That's a lot.
None of their descendants shall ever do so, for they did not meet you with food and water on your way as you came out from Mitzrayim, from Egypt. And furthermore, they hired Balaam, the son of Beor, of Pethor, in Aram Naharaim, to curse you. So we see that now with the scriptures what I just mentioned a moment earlier. Now here's an interesting scripture. This is from 1 Kings 14:21. And this was something that I missed in the past, but in doing the research for this, I found this. It says, now Rehoboam, son of Solomon, ruled in Judah. He was 41 years old when he became king and ruled for 17 years in Jerusalem, the city of Jehovah, the city that Jehovah chose for all the tribes of Israel to be his home. His mother was an Ammonite woman named Naamah. She's a queen mother, an Ammonite. Mm-hmm. Do you see the danger there?
Yep.
Now, who started that? It was Solomon. Solomon married it, and they were the ones that drove Solomon away from Jehovah.
Yeah.
And that tells me that Israelis also were practicing this evil thing. Not all of them, but some of them were. And they had been strictly forbidden to do that. Now, can you think of another queen mother that was also not Jewish?
Queen Sheba? The Sheba?
No.
No.
Jezebel.
Ooh.
Jezebel was queen mother, and she was from the kingdom of, she was married to, Ahab.
Ahab, yeah.
And then, that was in the northern kingdom, but then her daughter married and that's why she became queen mother, because her daughter married a king of Judah. And then, of course, so that was the second queen mother. Again, Solomon really was very bad, and his kingdom would have been taken away in a heartbeat had it not been that he was the son of David. He committed a worse, in my opinion, worse than Saul, sin to have his kingdom taken away from him.
That's why some people say that is Solomon in heaven.
What's that?
Some people say, is Solomon in heaven? Because, Belshazzar, that he turned to the Lord.
I believe he did.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
So then they say, well, you may be surprised. You may see him there, Nebuchadnezzar, but not Solomon.
Okay, so anyway, I don't know. I do not know. That's up to God. He did,
yes,
later in his life, I believe he did repent and so on, but not before he wrecked his kingdom and his life. He had every opportunity to be the most successful and happiest man in the world, and he wasn't, because he chose to disobey the Lord. He disobeyed the Lord in so many ways. It's incredible. All the stuff that he was told not to do, and he did it. So anyway, so let that be a lesson for us. When God tells you something, you see something in Scripture, God is not playing games with us. He means for us to obey him, rather than just doing a bunch of sacrifices like we like to do. Now, I'm going to go outside of biblical reference now and go to Flavius Josephus. Now, do you all know who Flavius Josephus was? He was a Jewish historian of the time of the Second Temple, right around the time of the destruction of the temple, of the Second Temple, and he wrote extensively on the antiquities of the Jews and the Jewish wars. And one of the things that he brought up, and I got this from chapter 5, and that's what he wrote concerning the Ammonites. And he said, and I'll go back a little bit here because I did not put a reference to this, but you remember when Saul was first crowned king, that the Ammonites came over and attacked Gilead and told them, if you surrender to me, I'll take your right eye out. And then I'll let you live. But if you don't, I'll destroy you. So they said, well, give us so many days and then come back and we'll give you a reply. And that's when the Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul and he delivered Israel from the Ammonites. So therefore, we know the rest of the story. They were defeated and so on. But now Josephus says this, that act of Saul was what, up to that moment, people really did not have any respect for Saul because he's just this young guy. They had to go look for him because he was hiding, he was afraid, and so on. That did not leave a very good impression. God had to tell him where to find Saul. So now the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. This great delivery takes place, and now Josephus makes a reference to that. It says, the war which Saul had with Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, obtained him respect from all people, for Nahash had done a great deal of mischief to the Jews that lived beyond the Jordan. And then I'll just skip forward. It says, reduce their cities into slavery, and so on. And then moving down a little bit, it says, for he put out the right eyes of those who that either delivered themselves to him upon terms or were taken by him in war. And this he did when their left eyes were covered by their shield. So what happened was, they took the right eye out, right? And most people are right-handed, right? So those days you carried a sword or a spear and you had a shield. And you carried the shield with your left hand because you wanted the right arm, which was your better arm, to use the sword. Well, if you have your right eye missing, you can't see. And that was the whole purpose of them gouging out the right eye. It wasn't so much about just to be cruel, though they were cruel, but also to make them useless in war. Just like the same way that the Assyrians had done with the enemies, where they ran them over with the threshing instruments, and they basically broke their legs and everything, so they were no longer able to be a threat to war, and basically not even be able to take care of themselves. So these are cruelties that we know from Prophet Amos when he told us that's the reason these people had committed 3 grave sins, but there was the 4th one that brought God's wrath upon them. But one thing that I wanted to mention, if you want to read more about Josephus concerning the Ammonites, I put a link below there. You can see it right there on the bottom. That link will show you the whole article or the writings of Josephus concerning the Ammonites. So I'm definitely not going to go into all that because that's not part of what I want to do. Now we know that I mentioned several weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, I mentioned that the whole scripture from Genesis to Revelation is little pieces of a puzzle. And you have to, as you're reading the different books of the Bible, you get tiny little pieces here and there. And concerning the Ammonites, the Jeremiah 49, 1-6 tells you about the judgment against Ammon. I'm not going to go into it because we're covering Amos, not Jeremiah. So we find on Amos 1:13, This is what Jehovah says, because the Ammonites have committed 3 crimes, make that 4. The Hebraism, make that 4. I will not revoke my decree of judgment. They ripped open Gilead's pregnant women so that they could expand their territory. So now we know why they were doing this. And it was not hard for them to do what they did, because they had been doing that to their own children, putting them through the fire. So it was a type of, this was a result of just their whole culture of the religion of Molech, to do that. And then if you see on the, which basically, they had other deities too, but they were known for this one, for the Molech. And basically you have this picture here, and there's a little description underneath, where basically it was a huge bronze statue. It was about 9 feet tall. And in the belly, or in the bottom of it, they would build a fire until they turned cherry red. And that's when they brought in their babies, and they put them on the arms of Molech, of that deity, and the child, of course, would go into the belly, into the fire, and be destroyed. And that's what they were doing. And you think, well, my goodness, we have progressed way beyond that, haven't we? Let me tell you.
We go into the mother.
I don't have... I know when you do these lessons, you have to be very careful what sources you quote, because you have to actually go and do the research. And sometimes I'm finding that it's getting more and more difficult to do any kind of research on Google and so on. It's just getting to where you don't trust even that anymore. And so getting some of this research is very difficult. But it is my understanding, and haven't done the research, so I cannot tell you for sure that I have done the research, and that's that today, from what I understand, every Republican president since 1923, I believe it is, have taken part of this ritual in California, where they have this big statue like of Moloch, except instead of it looking a man with a head of a bull, it's actually like an owl. And you'll find that whenever you have the worship of Moloch, that the owl symbols are all over the place. So owls. So what they did is they say that they don't do any human sacrifice, but it's only open to the elite, and that's why the elite seems to be attracted to this. Of course, we know Hillary Clinton and all that, but all this, oh, by the way, except for Trump. Trump did not participate in that. Trump doesn't like to be dealing with the elite, because he's basically a man that made he made his fortune, did all that. He was not part of that elite group, and he actually is patriotic. And I'm not saying this to say that Trump is perfect or anything like that, but I was shocked to find out that so many of the Republicans, that includes Reagan and all these people, and I did a little research on them, and I say this because this little clip that I'm going to show you, I want you to know that I'm not being political by doing this, because what I'm going to show you is going to be bad, but what the Republicans have done, I think, in my opinion, is even worse, because they have lied about what they really believe, and paint themselves as we're pro-life and this and the other, but yet their actions are completely opposite. If they participated on this, and because apparently this is a private meeting that they have once a year in California, and they have, basically it's about the worship of Molech. So this is very, very disturbing to me. It'll be happening, and sad to say, especially among the elites. This is so important to them. I don't know why it is. It's all I can think of is how satanic it is.
My position is in line with Roe v. Wade, that women have a constitutional right to make these most intimate and personal and difficult decisions based on their conscience, their faith, their family, their doctor, and that it is something that really goes to the core of privacy. And I want to maintain that constitutional protection. Under Roe v. Wade, as you know, there is room for reasonable kinds of restrictions after a certain point in time. I think the life, the health of the mother are clear, and those should be included even as one moves on in pregnancy.
When or if does
So
an
I've had the same
Right.
position for many years.
when or if does an unborn child have constitutional rights?
Well, under our laws currently, that is not something that exists. The unborn person doesn't have constitutional rights. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't do everything we possibly can in the vast majority of instances to, help a mother who is carrying a child and wants to make sure that child will be healthy, to have appropriate medical support. It doesn't mean that you don't do everything possible to try to fulfill your obligations, but it does not include sacrificing the woman's right to make decisions. And I think that's an important distinction that under Roe v. Wade we've had enshrined under our Constitution.
You had said you're for you think there are room for some restrictions. So is it fair to say that women don't always have a full right to choose?
Well, under Roe v. Wade, that is the law. And as I said, I support the reasoning and the outcome in Roe v. Wade. So in the third trimester of pregnancy, there is room for looking at the life and the health of the mother. Now, most people, not all Republicans, not all conservatives, even agree with the life of the mother, but most do. Where the distinction comes in is the health of the mother. And when you have candidates running for president who say that there should be no exceptions, not for rape, not for incest, not for health, then I think you've gotten pretty extreme. And my view has always been, this is a choice. It is not a mandate. I have traveled all over the world. I have seen what happens when governments make these decisions, whether it was forced sterilization, forced abortion in China, or forced childbearing in communist Romania. So I don't think that we should be allowing the government to make decisions that really properly belong to the individual.
NBC News
Yeah, go
fans,
ahead,
thanks for
Clark.
checking out our YouTube channel.
All right, so that was an interview when Hillary Clinton was running for president 8 years ago, and I'm not trying to pick on them other than to point out that that's the kind of rhetoric that we get from politicians from both sides of the aisle. So one says that they're pro-life and they're lying, and the other ones are saying we are pro-abortion and they're telling the truth. So you figure. Eddie brought something up. She mentioned person when he's dealing with the child in the womb, while the woman was named as a living being. And if you know from legalese talk, a person it's just a vessel. It's not a living flesh and blood. She's speaking as a lawyer at that point, because that's in court, a person is not flesh and blood. So that was not an accident that she said that. And so just be aware, God judged the Ammonites for that, along with other sins that they had committed. Are we going to be judged for what we are doing here in this nation with regards to the life of a child for reasons, for just because of the convenience? They don't want that pregnancy. They don't want this. And we have to look at ourselves and think, how long will it be before God pronounces judgment on us for doing that? I don't know. Every time I look and see our condition in the world today and our economy and so on, it seems to me that we're not that far from God basically pulling all his
Yes.
protection, and then the judgment comes, and I just wanted you to be aware of that. And then of course the next week I will be doing the Moabites, and then after that we're going to get to the kingdom of Israel and of Judah, and both of them committed. They were there. You know, we sometimes get the feeling that Israel, the northern kingdom, was worse because God judged them first. But no, the prophets, especially Ezekiel, tells us that Judah was even worse. And Ezekiel, in one of his visions, he was taken into the temple and he was seeing this happening, this sort of things happening. So obviously judgment came on Israel and Judah.